I know I'm very late with this review, but either ways, here it goes. Man The Wasp Quantomania is the first installment of the MCU's Phase 5, so I had a lot of expectations, especially due to Phase 4's mistakes. Unfortunately, Phase 5 is not off to a good start. Ant-Man struggles in three main aspects. 1. The movie is heavily plot-driven. 2. It is plot-convenient. And 3. The waste of an antagonist. For a story to function properly, structure is key. Part of the structure is to have an active protagonist instead of a passive one. If a character is reacting to things happening around him or her, it becomes boring to see. Without choices made by the protagonist, he or she doesn't undergo that change active characters go through. If we don't see the hero make choices or face the consequences of their own actions, why do we care? Why tell the story? We don't emphasize the character because we're never giving a reason to care for them, and as a result, we lose our interest. In Ant-Man, Scott never makes a choice that would drive the plot forward. Instead, he reacts to what's happening around him. From finding his daughter has been arrested, being stuck in the quantum realm, and being forced to retrieve Kang's battery, Scott never actively makes a decision that pushes the plot forward. He's either thrown into the fray or forced into doing something. For example, instead of Kang's army showing up for no apparent reason to the camp that Scott and Cassie were dragged into, have Scott perform an action that leads Kang's army to the resistance. That way, Scott's actions leads to a consequence that would drive the movie forward. This way, Scott would realize that he's the one that brought Kang's army to the resistance, so their blood is on his hands. His actions have consequences. And even though they might have come from good intentions, it can still lead to negative results. The movie's second offense was plot convenience. The movie exists because of it. If Janet would have spoken up about her time in the quantum realm, the movie wouldn't have existed. But because the plot needed it to happen, Janet said nothing. She remained silent until the hour mark. But I'll go over that shortly. Since everything is plot convenient, there are no high stakes in the movie. Everything is solved with ease. Janet's group encounters a mysterious gang. They're giving a ride. They need help. Janet knows a guy. The guy betrays them. They escape in the ship with ease. The movie never really got a chance to fully develop any stakes at all because any obstacle that arose was solved almost immediately with no repercussions because the plot needed it to happen. If a scene doesn't help drive the plot forward correctly, then the scene is not needed. If the only reason the scene exists is to continue the plot, then there's something wrong with the scene. Every scene needs to tell its own story, one where we see the characters grow. But in Ant-Man, each scene serves as a transition to the next scene with no real purpose of the previous scene. For example, Lord Kryler is never mentioned again, and neither is the gang that offers them a ride, because all that scene with Lord Kryler was to get a ship. When they met the gang, was for a ride to get to Lord Kryler. And that is just lazy writing. But what I feel was the worst offense is when Janet connects with Kang's mind through his ship and sees what he's done. She sees the monster he truly is and is terrified of him, that she sacrifices her chance of being with Hank and Hope to prevent Kang from escaping. It's exactly the same scene as Multiverse of Madness' Memory Lane, which is just lazy writing. Besides that, it's the only time we ever get to see Kang do anything. Before I talk about the villain, I have to get this out of the way. Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania was not a sequel to Ant-Man, but of Loki Season 1. Like Multiverse of Madness was a sequel to WandaVision and not Doctor Strange, in Loki we are told what Kang the Conqueror could be capable of. Another version of He Who Remains, though not as nice. It builds on Kang for this movie, yet we don't see any of that present here. That is because this movie's sole purpose is to get you excited for the next product, a transition from one project to the next, and in doing so, make the villain weak to set up the bigger baddie for the future. Kang was built up to be a terrifying villain, one who appears like a decent fellow on the surface, but a bloodthirsty conqueror capable of killing thousands who stand in his way. But boy was Kang the Conqueror such a wasted character. All he does is talk and yell. He is shown to show dominance with just a flick of his finger, but when Act 3 rolls around, all he does is yell at his army to get the hell out of Dodge. And when the going gets tough, he gets defeated by ants. Why build up a character to only have him do nothing? It's not satisfying to see the main antagonist get defeated when he wasn't much of a big threat to begin with. A good villain has to be greater or of equal value to the protagonist. Therefore, the antagonist is a threat to the protagonist, and the stakes are high because the antagonist could be victorious if the protagonist fails. It's the reason we root for the hero, the reason we cheer when the villain is ultimately defeated. When Kang defeats Scott and his group with ease, it builds up suspense, only for him to get defeated easily. As for MODOK, he's described to be an unstoppable killing machine, but we only see it once. After that, he's essentially Kang's. Then on top of that, he is redeemed in the most dumb way possible. His character from the first Ant-Man was completely vanished and replaced by this monstrosity. 2 antagonists were ultimately wasted. Unfortunately, the movie was subpar, which is a shame because I'm one of the few who actually likes Ant-Man as a character. If this is where Marvel keeps heading, people will lose interest.